Welcome to the Inspired Hive Podcast, where we connect ambitious entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers with the ideas and inspiration to elevate their leadership, business, and life. I'm your host, Margo. Each week, we dive into powerful conversations on leadership, personal growth, and how to thrive along the journey. Let's listen in. Dr. Lisa Hardesty is the CEO of Lookup, an executive coaching practice that connects, empowers, and ignites individuals to open up to the possibilities and potential that we all have to live fulfilling, impactful lives. Lookup combines evidence-based information with practical solutions that she's gleaned from over 30 years of clinical and executive coaching work in the corporate setting. Lisa, I am so excited to chat with you today. You have been such an inspiration in my career and my journey. You know, we met back in grad school. You're a couple years ahead. And I was always so impressed with how you balance things and still had time for fun and also navigating the research, the training, the education, how you were focused on practice as well as kind of the clinical aspects. I've just seen how smoothly you've navigated that. And I love that we've been able to reconnect and continue to be connected throughout our career. And I'm excited to hear your next chapter and what's coming.
Yes. Well, thank you. You know, it's incredible moments in life when you hear feedback, like you don't have to retire or die. And to hear how you may have impacted or inspired. And I don't know if this is true for everyone, but I often find when I hear things like what you just said, is that I feel the same. And so it's so interesting to have that from someone that you also look up to. I mean, I just love watching you and your career, and you've served as an inspiration for me to be more bold and to step into kind of this next chapter for me. So
Where did your story begin with your new adventure?
I would say, there's times where you say, oh gosh, I want to do this because it feels like a next step. And then there's times where you're drawn to something or feel called to it and pulled. And I'm not sure I could identify a specific moment, but definitely patterns and, kind of like a knocking at your noggin. I think I must listen to this. Back in 2015, I was attending a class, actually, when I was going back to school for my executive coaching certification. And it was Barbara Fredrickson, who's one of the great psychologists, of course. And she was talking about how she sees that in some of their work and some of their studies, we're losing our biobehavioral patterns for reciprocity and connection and some of the concerns that are coming out with our use of technology. So that's 2015. But I remember thinking like, oh, looking around at faces and thinking, shouldn't we be more upset about this or a little nervous than we are? And so here we are in 2024. And I do feel a little bit of a burning platform with this topic dating back to that time.
It's interesting how these points of time are things that you're picking up or describing as kind of those inspirational moments or those sparks that may have inspired you, but also that might continue to be pulling you or pushing, depending on the process. What's inspired you?
Throughout this journey, I've practiced in the patient care for 30 years. So certainly honor of sitting side by side with people as they go through their journey. And I specialized in trauma for about 10 years of that. So that's even more humbling, just listening to people's experiences and, story after story, but you also start to see those patterns. Even now I'm involved in our community and I'm very inspired by a friend and colleague of mine. She lost her 13-year-old daughter to suicide. And we've started some mental health initiatives, suicide prevention in our community. And it just feels like all of those inspirational points. And I like that you used spark because it does feel like that's like someone lit a match. There's kind of a longer story here, but the shorter version is that Mel is her name. Again, my friend and colleague who lost her daughter. She's been working in our community and just partnering with her and I remember in 2019 looking at loneliness statistics, they were very high. And after the pandemic, certainly that those numbers have continued to rise. So my inspirational moments would be, and that spark would be working with those patients, those clients over those years, culminating in most recently, just really feeling like I have to do something. These sparks are here and I must listen. I want to follow through.
Well,
So
and it's so interesting because technology can be so helpful for some of these kinds of conversations and some of these
right.
connections. And our world really has transitioned from, instead of writing letters and really having time and thought into the things that we do, to having that instant connector that isn't necessarily a feels real, but seems real.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I so appreciate your comments in terms of just that loneliness factor, but also that it seems like connection, but it also seems like it's not really meeting our needs with that.
Yeah.
Maybe tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Yeah. Definitely relevant to what you were describing. So the business lookup, it has three components to it: looking up and seeing. So you and I seeing each other, getting off of our phones. If we're out to dinner, perhaps our phones can be put away. So we're looking up and seeing. I'm not, looking at technology as the villain. I'm looking at how do we really work on ourselves, work on our best selves and our relationships, and then use technology for good. Because it is a great way to see you today, Margo. And it is a great way for us to connect. And I think there are all kinds of transformations and things that we can look into in the future. We also can connect. And so look up and see, then look up and be, which is a component of the work, me going inside of me and working on identity. And I think that again has been chiseled away. I see a lot of younger folks unsure of who they are. They've looked to social media or they've looked to, something external to themselves to define. And so I do a lot with chosen identity. And then the final is look up and believe. So look up and see, be, and believe. And the believe is all about we're here for something bigger than us. And I want to help people, even when they're younger, to really find some of that purpose, to find some of that. When you said spark earlier, it's in my title for one of the courses is Ignite Your Spark. So
Mm.
how do you really connect with self, connect with others, and then ignite that spark so that you can have that impact that we're all here to have?
That's such an intriguing collection, I'll call it, of the components of helping others really have a sense of maybe confidence in who they are, but also that they can be without having to have that technology or that line of connection that isn't that belly to belly or interpersonal connection. And I do see that for so many folks that they don't know how to call and make an appointment because it's not a text feature phone, or we can't do it on the internet. And why can't we? And it's almost this kind of component of we don't want to be connected, but we really need to be connected. And so I love this idea of looking up and kind of thinking about something bigger, thinking about that larger connection. It's inspirational in that way as well. So I'm just so excited to hear how this has all kind of come together and come to fruition from those initial sparks for you. How did you come up with the name?
So in my mind, I would see families at a dinner, right? And I would be like, look up, as they're on their phones and not interacting and just
Mm,
watching my kids bring their friends over and they're all on their phones and sitting in a semicircle, but not necessarily interacting. And in my mind, I was like, look up, look up. And it did. It really, like, I woke up one day and I was like, look up, like, that's the name of my business. It just made so much sense. It's been resonant. Even the look up and CB and believe, those three aspects of it. I was talking to my son who was going to help me with something. And he said, well, because we were doing some shirts and things. And I said, well, let's just do 3 campaigns. And here they are. I mean, it was like it was there, intuitively, like this is what this is. And, as I've had conversations with people, a recent article that I came across was on maternal gaze, and that as moms are breastfeeding, and if they're looking at their phone, that parts of the baby's brain isn't developing in the way that we would want it to develop mentally. And so again, I think like our feet are on fire, people. Like we should be thinking about this. So having conversations about the impact, and then how do you have a better relationship with technology? What does that look like? What does intentionality look like? So yeah, it's been really fun just to have the conversations. I think people are kind of hungry for this. They're feeling the pains and yet not quite sure what do I do with this? I mean, this phone is here. It's not going away. This technology, this computer, how I work, many of us working remote, all of that is here to stay. How do we stay well? And how do we bring back the people, the belonging component, that connection?
And setting those boundaries.
And setting the boundaries.
How
Yes.
powerful it is to hear about the research that guides those recommendations that,
Right.
we're seeing this in schools now of even whole states banning
Mhm.
phones in schools because they finally figured out it's in the way. But I think the research is really supporting this
Right.
and recognizing that, like you said, we can use technology for good, but we have to really structure and have some boundaries around what that means. Knowing the effects can be a powerful component of that. What's been your biggest lesson maybe that you've been blessed with or that has been part of this journey for you?
Well, of course, there are many, right? We
Mm,
have lots of lessons. Maybe this is a two-sided coin because one of the campaigns that I'm organizing right now is to make looking up cool, right? So I want to catch people looking up, and we're going to do some fun things. So how do I make it so that it feels good and that people are yearning for that? So when you ask that question, that kind of came in my mind. And then on the other side of that is, as I've worked with individuals throughout my time, in that more therapeutic realm, as I've done executive coaching, so many people have the answers within them.
mm,
And we put on pretenses, or we put on these given identities, these covers. And when you allow people to unveil and to find that vulnerability, that they have those answers within them, and that is just so exciting to me to watch that, to be a part of it. And I use this in some of my presentations as well, that Dorothy had the shoes on the whole time. So let's just demonstrate that. Let's find that. And just watching people come into their true self, there's just no greater gift on the outside to watch
mm.
that. So I would say lessons learned. People have those answers within them, and they're hungry to really just be that true self and find that true self.
I love this notion that it's not that we have to look externally, but it really is about l- leaning
Mhm.
in, right? Looking up, but leaning in and really recognizing
Yeah.
what the gifts are and what the strengths are that we have within us.
Mhm.
That really also comes back to what you said earlier, which was, you kind of had these sparks and things, and we're trying to like not pay attention, but they kept knocking harder. That's something that we really maybe we forget how to dream or how to imagine or how to really zone in terms of some of that. We get locked in step of what we think we're supposed to do. I love that you're helping folks kind of peel those onion
Yeah.
layers
Layer by
and
layer.
yeah, and really dig into what that true sense is because it's in there.
It's in there. And when people find it, it's just like, oh, thank you. This has been here for so long. Thank you for helping me unleash this.
Yeah. It's been wanting to get it out,
It's
but
been wanting to get out. And it was interesting to hear you say what you just said, because I do, like, one of the things I've said several times is let's bring daydreaming back. Remember good old daydreaming when you'd look out the window and you're bored? I mean, how often does it happen right now? So when we are focused, when we are in our emails or on the phone or, answering whatever it is, we are not in our best minds for big thinking or creative thinking or innovative thinking. So it is these things that I've been given externally, and I'm so busy scrolling or looking or not going in, not daydreaming, not doing my big picture thinking. I don't even know how to unpeel those onion layers. And that's exciting for me when I'm able to do that and watch that. And exciting, I hope people are inspired listening to this to think, what are some of those layers within me?
Yeah.
And start to look in.
It's almost as though we've lost the tools for kind of sensing that or allowing that feeling. And, certainly technology gets in the way of that exploration time, even maybe learning how or allowing that process to happen. And, I know a lot of folks talk about journaling, and I think that's a little bit of that entry in. And I've always been a giant fan of the thoughts coming out the hand, the processing of the information through our brain, and actually not just entering it in something, but writing it out and getting back to that. It sounds like is part of what can help us peel away
Yeah.
those components. So tell us what you're excited about coming down the pike. What are you looking forward to and what's coming?
So again, a campaign of rewarding folks for looking up. That's kind of in the works in the background. I do have a course that has been developed, and I've had a few folks individually participate, and there's 6 pillars. So it really is what we've already talked about. It's that negative thinking or stinking thinking, as I like to call it, right? And also understanding my style, my personality, my attachment. That's a little bit of that knowing self. But also, I think sometimes, depending on how much trauma people had or how they grew up, this is not therapy. It's just understanding me and how I'm showing up at work with relationships, and then moving into the identity work, the connection work, and then declaring it, putting a voice to that and saying, I'm going to ask for that, or I'm going to say no to that because I know myself now, and coming from a place of clarity. So I'm hoping in the spring, I'm trying to, chicken or the egg, if the retreat would come first or the program, really ready to go. And I appreciate opportunities to talk about it. And I've had some movement just on Facebook and trying to put my name out there. I've been working for Mayo Clinic for 27 years, so I have so much loyalty and so much affiliation and association there. This is different. People know me here, but they don't know me here. So trying to really get that out there in a different way. So very excited about what's coming, especially 2025. I think that's when really there'll be more opportunities to engage with Lookup. So
I love hearing the journey. And that's really a component of this podcast, is helping others to hear a bit more about the journey, because it's not always linear. It's not always, you can plan it really well and you can get ready to get ready. But until you start taking that action, and sometimes it's messy. Sometimes one step leads to several side steps, and all in all, in the end, when you listen to all those things, you can have such a richer product. Before we sign off, I am really curious if you have one piece of advice.
bringing it to one thing would be, you alluded to this, is that if there's been something that resonated from here this time listening, maybe listening to one of your other podcasts, bring that action into place. So it's that first movement that then solidifies what that thought was. Start today. Grab something that you've heard, something that's knocked at your noggin, and implement it. And you're going to find 3 months from now, when you think back to this date that you listened to this, things are different for me now.
I love this concept of, if it's knocking or that one thought, take some action with it. And, it doesn't have to be giant, but it does have to be motion. movement and
Yes.
moving and growing towards whatever that dream is or whatever that spark is for
Mhm.
you. So what a great piece of advice. Lisa, thank you so much. I'm so grateful and honored that you came on to share some of your journey with us. I do appreciate you being here today. I am going to sign off today with this quote from Helen Keller. Keep your face to the sunshine, and you cannot see a shadow. Hey, thanks for spending time with us on the Inspired Hive podcast today. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Inspired Hive Podcast and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on what's coming up next. Can't wait to have you back, and as always, live inspired.